Welcome, everyone. I am Peter Kavoyan, and I would like to thank you on behalf of the Homeowners Committee for attending tonight's very popular event. Tonight's presentation is part of our speaker series that our Homeowners Committee puts on each quarter. Our goal is to entertain and inform our members on various topics. Tonight's presentation is Montecito Mansions, the families, the fortunes, and of course, the best part, the scandals. Did you know that tonight's event sold out in 4 hours? We could have filled this room twice. One thing I can surmise by everyone in this room is that no one here is a procrastinator. Aaron has generously allowed me to take a few minutes to share the story of another Montecito mansion. So imagine for a moment, it's 1917. Cornelius Kingsley Garrison Billings is boarding a train in New York City. That's quite a name, isn't it? I mean, you've got to be rich to have a name like that. You certainly can't be poor. Known by his initials, CKG, he is heading to Santa Barbara, California, to visit his friend and his business partner, George Knapp. Together, they co-founded a company named Union Carbide. With him is his wife, Blanche, their 2 children, and 23 servants. That's about right. Additionally, he loads a herd of prized horses, numerous luxurious Packards, and a limousine on board the train. It is his train. By today's standards, he is a certified billionaire. With $784 million, he was in cash in the bank. He was one of the wealthiest men in the United States. When he arrived in Santa Barbara, local citizens lined up at the train station just to watch. They wanted to see the carnival of wealth as he and his entourage disembarked. CKG is instantly smitten by the beauty of our town. He purchases over 100 acres of prime ocean view land south of Alston Road. He hires local architects, Francis Underhill and Carlton Winslow, to design and build numerous guest houses, a 15,000 square foot castle for himself and his family, and has all the structures connected with charming riding trails. In 1922, he permanently moves to Santa Barbara. Now it's 1937. A virulent flu is spreading across the United States. Blanche Billings catches the virus. In 1 week, she dies. 3 days later, CKG, philanthropist, eccentric, and a visionary, dies from the virus as well. They both pass away in the castle that they love. It is now 1940. Across the world, in Croatia, lives a man named William Zimden. He is a tall and dashing presence, arguably the wealthiest man in all of Eastern Europe. He's an industrialist and a banker. He lives with his mistress in a 45,000 square foot Moorish palace that he built, and he named it Shangri-La, and it overlooks the Adriatic Sea. The winds of war are blowing. Adolf Hitler needs money to finance his war machine. He contacts Mr. Zimden and requests his assistance. Mr. Zimden is of Estonian and German descent. He is also Jewish. He tells Adolf Hitler to go pound sand. And he also calls him a psychopath. Adolf did not like that. Adolf Hitler put Mr. Zimden and his secretary, Dr. Dennis Karzak, on a hit list. Both men immediately flee for the United States. Zimden arrives in Santa Barbara. He sees the Billings main house is for sale and the abutting Montecito Country Club, and he buys them both on the spot. It is now 1948. The war is over. Mr. Zimden is deeply moved by the suffering that people endured during wartime injuries, from wartime injuries. In the dining room of his castle, he establishes a medical foundation to help those in need. That charity today is Direct Relief International. Just 2 years later, his confidant and friend and secretary, Dr. Dennis Karzak, says to him, "William, you need an heir to run the growing foundation." Zimden responds, "Find me a wife." So Dr. Karzak arranges for the most beautiful woman in Estonia to come to America to meet Zimden. She sails to America, they meet, and they marry. Just one little problem. They hate each other. The newly married Elizabeth Zimden is distraught. So she sends for her favorite cousin, Eugene, to come to America to be by her side. Eugene is a muscular performer at parties and the toast of European aristocracy. What does he do for a living, you ask? He is a professional juggler. Zimden had it, and he files for divorce. 1 month before the divorce is finalized between he and Elizabeth, he drops dead of a massive heart attack. Of course, right? Yeah. She inherits half of his estate. Direct Relief gets the other half. Elizabeth and Eugene remain in the castle. Later, it is revealed Eugene is not her cousin at all. He is her, in fact, Estonian lover and the love of her life. To maintain social propriety, it will be a charade that they both would play out to the very end of their lives. It is now 1994. Two ordinary guys from Santa Fe, New Mexico decide to move to Santa Barbara to be closer to family. They want an authentic Spanish house, Their friend was the president of Direct Relief International. She said that she had the perfect house for them, but the purchase would be complicated. The problem, or you see the issue, is that Elizabeth and Eugene were both still alive. They were living in this crumbling mansion that barely had running water and had absolutely no heat. The treasures inside the house had been sold off or given away. This elderly couple who lived in the castle had no money. They eventually worked out the purchase. So these two ordinary Joes who bought the castle but had no real understanding, at the time at least, of the luminaries who preceded them. Those ordinary guys of whom I speak are Ray Wynn and me, Peter Cavoyan. So this is just simply one of hundreds of similar stories about Montecito's past. The great mystique of these wonderful estates and how they magnetically attract the powerful globally. Our speaker this evening has been educating and entertaining Santa Barbara with her presentations on regional history throughout our community. Frequently described as the Herb Cain of Santa Barbara, our speaker has been tapped by media worldwide. Here we go. Technical difficulties. I'll just continue over here. Okay, great. So worldwide on Santa Barbara history and culture, from the London Times to the Los Angeles Times. Our speaker is an award-winning writer of numerous books and has been honored with the prestigious Ben Franklin Book Award. She is an International Book Award finalist among many other honors. Her popular How to Santa Barbara book series continues to sell 20 years after its release. You'll probably sell more books here tonight. She has appeared in several documentaries on Santa Barbara history and was featured in the 2015 Pasadena Tournament of Roses Parade as a California historian. She truly knows where all of the bodies have been buried and is here today to uncover some of those for us. Please welcome our speaker and one heck of a dancer, I might add, Erin Graffey.
Okay, get all my toys here in order. She like this. All righty. Well, Santa Barbara and Montecito have just the juiciest history. Don't know how else to put it. Other towns might have some history, but we've really got the gold load here. When Peter and I were first talking, I was meeting with the committee. At first, I thought I would do a whole bunch of mansions. And as the time went on, I narrowed it down to 3 and then to 2. And there is so much information on these different things. We're going to emphasize just today the von Romberg Estate. And the fun part about this is it's an estate that everybody recognizes the names and knows something of it. But the whole history behind it and the people behind it are the part that's not known. So what you're going to hear today is what nobody else has heard yet in this community. So you're getting all the good, juicy stuff. And what's fascinating is that this is a glimpse into the unknown story of the owners of one of Montecito's well-known estates. Let's see if I got this right here. Okay. So the story is about an American heiress and a German titled nobleman. They grew up in the jazz age in the 20s and embodied basically the Montecito flavor and lifestyle of glamour, wealth, and privilege. And their estate, Brunninghausen, was the subject of dark rumors as the Third Reich increased during the 1930s, and there were rumors of Nazis and Brunninghausen, and people at this time with strong ties to Germany were basically fell under suspicion, and especially if their names were preceded by titles like a baron and baroness. So there was whispers of this Nazi connection, and after all, wasn't this house built in the shape of a swastika? So secrets to be revealed. Let's see. Oh, they didn't. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, now just to jump right in, we're going to look at her side, his side. We're going to look at her side. And this is Emily Burden Hall. She was born in Butte, Montana on about 1908. And what Butte, Montana was known for two things. One was being butt ugly, or as the French would say, Butte ugly, perhaps. And the other thing was because it was a town where there was copper mining, which is why what made Butte actually pretty ugly. And you think, why was copper so big there? And at this time, this was probably the biggest copper mining in the United States. And there was more money to be made in copper mining than there was in gold and silver. And what I love about history is you usually just look on one statement like this and then you just go on. But I think if you know, if world was a link and you could link that, you would see there's a whole nother world of discovery on what is it about copper. Well, just shortly, Edison invented the light bulb, and light bulbs in order to turn on needed wiring, and all of that was made out of copper. Thank you. Go to the head of the class. Okay. Her father was a dentist, and there's some cute story that says a grateful patient gave him stock in copper mining, but he was a very, very prudent, careful man. He married very late in life and opened his practice there, and then started actually investing in the mines, but also investing in the mining materials and the equipment that people use. Just like in the gold rush, the big money was basically mining the miners, right? So he makes tons of money. He has two daughters, Emily and Jane. And they were actually not so much growing up in Butte, Montana, but they traveled so much, and the parents brought tutors with them and scholars and the special people wherever they were going that they might, if they were in Paris, they would have a tutor that would take them to the museums to see the art, which bears on her life later on. And nonetheless, they do very, very well. When they're in Butte, Montana, remember there's some other friends of theirs there. Hope there's our lovely Butte, Montana, if you can see what we're talking about there. There's the other Clark estate, because the Clarks were there, William Andrews Clark, and also his brother, J. Ross, were both good friends of our dentist, Dr. Hall. And the family also comes to, oh, there we go. Tip one. Something's missing here. Okay, well, we'll just jump ahead here. The other side of the family is Grandma Smith. And this is her mother's side of the grandmother. And Mr. Smith was actually a preacher, and he had 6 kids. And he had some problem with his throat and wanted to go into other business. But having 6 kids and he wanted clean clothes as a preacher, he invented the washer machine. And he called it the Success washer machine. And then he went into turbines and made a lot of money in that. And in fact, he actually made a wind turbine, which until 1979 was the largest wind turbine in the United States. And this was built, 100 years previous to that. Okay, so what else have we got? Okay, so the family does come here also among their different homes. They buy Glen Oaks, which was built in 1896. And it was a very large home for just the few of them, but they have one section of the home where the girls, Jane and Emily, will be educated there as well when their tutors come in and when they are in Santa Barbara. Oh, and just a little fun story. They're traveling all over the world, even to going to Egypt. And again, they have a tutor with them. And when little Emily and the family was staying at the Shepherd's Hotel in Cairo, one of the famous magicians of the long line of magicians, all called Gali Gali, was there. And she's playing on the porch. and she has a half crown, and he gets another little boy to come up and does a magic, and he has a shilling. And by the time it's done, she in her pocket realizes she has the shilling and the other little boy has the half crown. So this always stayed with her because, of course, kids being at that age, about 10 years old, and the magic. So more fun. And then she has her coming out party at about the age of 19 in Montecito. And at her coming out party is a young German man who is absolutely taken with her. And as they talk, they realize they've actually seen and met each other before in the years in Europe, in different cities. And he was the little boy in Cairo. And she wants her half crown back. But anyway, they did remember all that. So on his side, there we go. He came from here we have his full title, Baron Maximilian Edmund Hugo Converse Wilhelm von Romberg. You got to be pretty tall to carry all that name, but he pulled it off. And he came from a very distinguished family from Wiesbaden, Germany. Actually, the family name and the barons went back about 800 years, 12th century, and he is the 19th baron in the family. He's gorgeous. He has blue eyes, he has dark brown hair, slicked back, very dashing, a beautiful profile. She's gorgeous. This looks really good. And let's see, his family is very distinguished. His grandfather was General William von Romberg, who led one of the 3 Southern divisions in the Franco-Prussian War. And his father was yada, 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 von Romberg. I can't, we'll forget all the little part and the rest of that. And he was with the 80th Prussian Fusiliers in the First World War. And he was unfortunately well known to be the first German officer to be killed in World War I. And thereafter, for all the news stories about Max, they always mention his father was part of the 80th Prussian Division, a first German officer killed in World War I. I don't know if that's the way I want to be known, but nonetheless. And he was about 3 years old when this happened. Let's see what else we've got. So there we've got our Baron Maximilian, born 1911 and descended from the noble Prussian military families. Now, if being a titled European wasn't worth enough, there's always the American mother. And his mother's side of the family, oops, no, we have one more photo. Oh, you know, I had to put this in. This is so cool. Probably, I'm not expecting anybody to know who this artist was, but as soon as I saw it, I did a whole monograph. And this is Clarence Maddie, as in Maddie's Tavern. So his father was the tavern owner. He was the 4th of the 5 boys, and he was quite the portraiture artist. And gave up painting and just went into, I think it was John Singer Sargent who told him, you know, it takes too much time. You can't make enough money. You know, go to graphite and pencil, and that's what he did. So you see here, if you've got the Baron, and up in the corner, you see his crest. It almost looks like 3 wings of an airplane, which would make a lot of sense. It's probably feathers with a crown. All righty. On his mother's side of the family, the father, the grandfather for him, was Edmund Cogwell Converse, founder of, he actually was an engineer to begin with and started doing metal tubes. I didn't know there was money to be made in metal tubes, but in the 19th century, there was a lot of money to be made in metal tubes. And with that, he goes into US Steel, and he was president, one of the founding directors, and he was the founder of Bankers Trust Company, as in ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. When Converse dies, oh wait, we forgot about the mother. There she is. The portrait does look, photograph does look a little strange. It looks like she's facing the wrong way. Like if you remember the little girl in Exorcist. And so maybe this is why he was always turned around. Okay. Yeah, I guess she's, yeah, anyway. The father dies, her father dies in 1921, and his net worth was, his estate was worth 21 to 30 million in 1921, which would be worth around 304, maybe 550 million today. And this is in an era where people probably, it's the 1920s, and they're earning, which is an easier way to find out what money is worth. They're earning several $100s, maybe $400, $500, $600 a year salary. So a lot of money. All righty, going right into the wedding. the newlyweds. So he gets her hand. He's all excited. They are smitten with each other, just absolutely in love. And he writes to her this glowing story saying that he's talked to the father and the father agrees to allow them to marry, to give him the hand. And apparently he lied and told his future father-in-law that he was turning 18 in March. He was turning 17. And she was only turning 20. But they were off and running and described as members of the Santa Barbara exclusive social set. For their funny, oops. Nice picture just to get a load of them there. And let's take a look at, they were married at the little church around the corner in New York because the families also had apartments and homes and things, flats in New York City. And here is their wedding picture. And, you know, when I saw this, I thought, you know, the one girl looked kind of familiar, but obviously I wouldn't know people back then. Or did I? Turns out I did. You get Clark. So nobody has seen this photo. So you should just go, yeah, it was cool. And I saw you get. And so they don't have it in any of the books or something. So I just was, you know, fun. And when they take off, he has got his pilot's license and he is into planes, his new Fairchild. And just for you pilots in the room, I had to show the, the cockpit. And everything he owns is, so remember this, the family colors with the crest and everything are maroon and gray. So everything he owns, he has painted maroon and gray. So this plane was eventually painted maroon and gray. And as were all his cars and his boats, speedboats, etc. And yeah, I just think that's adorable. So they're always dressed up like this for all the photographs. And it's kind of interesting that they're almost immediately start being followed by the press. And they weren't known separately, but when you think about this, there's no internet, okay, there's no TV, there's not even radio. They were just famous for being moneyed and running around with a lot of it. So they're covered all the time in the paper and where they're going and what's happening. And they always describe him as a daring aviator. And again, daring aviator, and we go, well, I suppose there's some risk. But back in the 20s was kind of a golden era for private pilots. You know, we've gone through Lindbergh and everybody else, and now the very wealthy, instead of buying your own winery or part of Hollister Ranch, the cool thing to do was to buy your own airplane and learn how to fly it yourself. You didn't have somebody else do it. So that's why he's called the daring aviator. Oh, and the other part, is, of course, is it's still early enough where the planes aren't that stable. You don't have that much control. You're not flying that high, so it's easier to crash the planes. Probably you're more likely to survive a plane crash than you would today. So, but anyway, there you have that. And what else was I going to say? And also just I know there's some of you here who have heard my talk on aviation in Santa Barbara because it's absolutely phenomenal so early. The aviation airplanes and aviators that we had right here in Little Santa Barbara. So far they're off to a good flight start. And let's talk about newlywed life. He was going to go to Harvard, but he just can't sit still long enough to go to Harvard. So they freed from the confines of actually going to school and having an education. All they do is party and travel. They've got all this nice money. And in fact, oh, this is kind of cool. I don't know if you can read that if it's that too small, but I had to throw this in because it was just too fascinating. So here is their sort of their bloodlines and their moneyed lines. And you can see over here, oops, let me get here, von Romberg. He's a titled nobility. He's probably good for a castle someplace in Europe, but that's not where all the money is coming from. It's coming from his mother's father, the other fathers. And why I think this is so interesting is this is the total American story, 19th century. I mean, how fascinating. Coming out of the Industrial Revolution, everything is innovation. You don't have government getting so much in the way. And you have these people who are self-made millionaires within their own lifetime, starting as adults. Now think about that. That's really phenomenal. And I found this quote someplace that I had to throw in here. Santa Barbara was not a place where one made money. It was a place where one spent it, having made it elsewhere. So that's what our kids are going to do here. So we'll just flash through some of these fun photos if they don't look like quite the pair. I love this because it kind of looks, a lot of the fashions looks like you could wear them today, except for the tank tops for the guys. That was probably the 1920s, 30s version of Speedo, only they wore it on the top half. So here's at the Cafe Trucadero. When it just opened, this was on Sunset. And there with Philip Chancellor, who is another young multi-billionaire. Actually, he made a lot of the money himself through all kinds of inventions. And his father had an estate in Montecito, and that was Philip Chancellor. So let's see what else have we got here. Okay, Biltmore Horse Show. This was the ball put on by the Junior League, and here he is with J. Ross Jr., Clark. Same thing, the Clark Estates, and this would be Huguette's cousin. And just more sensational stories. Here's them hunkering down, looking normal at home. And he's just, you know, the hand in the pot, and just the whole look is just too cute. Here, this is at the, God, this, I couldn't figure out where this was. And I actually, if you those who know how to Google search through image, and I just had to pour through stuff, I was just dying to know where this was. Anyway, this was a 1934 Chicago World's Fair. And remember, the theme was Century of Progress. So they were showing all the new inventions, et cetera. And of course, he's right there. And this kid didn't go to college, but I tell you, he was so inventive himself and went into so many different things. At one point, he gets into photography, which I think he got from his friend Chancellor, who was in all sorts of societies for photography. And so they just basically had to settle for a life of parties and polo and flying and big game hunting. They went all over the world to visit his mother in France, his hometown in Germany, in New York. I don't think they had a permanent residence there. That was just their home away from home, and they got to do a lot of bits there. And if you think about it, they were jet setters 10 years before jets were even invented. And these were the beautiful people decades before that term came up. I actually looked that up in Merriam-Webster. Merriam and Webster got married, so now that's not just Webster. And it said the beautiful people were defined as wealthy or famous people whose lifestyle is usually expensive and well publicized. There you have it. Alrighty, another thing they did was, especially him, big game hunting. And he put holes in his fuselage of his plane so that they could put their rifles through and do hunting this way. A little horrible if you're not in hunting, but clever if you were in. Okay, here they look like Bonnie and Clyde. And just look at him with the hat, the card, the whole 9 yards. But let's take a closer look at her face. She looks a tad disgruntled, would you say? So we're wondering what that's about. Well, wonder no more, because now we're going to see sort of a little more behind the scenes, which is Mad Max and his 9 lives. So, got the right, yes, okay. He liked fast cars, fast speedboats, airplanes. He was attracted to speed, danger, and excitement. Hunting expeditions in Mexico, and he's not dove hunting. They're, you know, big game, et cetera, et cetera. Mexico, Canada, Alaska, deer hunting in Arizona with Clark Gable. With his cousins in Alaska, went moose hunting and took home a 67-inch, 13 points on each side moose, for those who know what that is. They also went to, during hibernation season, and with Philip Chancellor to see the Kodiak bears when they were hibernating. So this is just this wild, crazy life. But he's also Max of the 9 lives. And this was actually written up in the papers that the guy just keeps escaping death. So I want to just read a couple of these to you, just really short versions. One was just 5 months after they were married, he goes down to an air show in Los Angeles. And on the way back home, he's attempting to land. His engine exploded and the cockpit began to fill with smoke and flame. The engine died and went silent, and he narrowly escaped death by making a dead stick landing, for those, you know, when the propeller stops and the whole rest of that. And he sets down the plane with no injury to himself and just minor damage to the fuselage. Then polo. Oops. Okay. He gets into polo and he hadn't been playing that very long. Remember, he's getting married at 17 and he'd only been playing for about a year and a half before then that I've been able to figure out. But he gets involved in the Montecito polo troops, everything here. He goes on the teams. He's what do you call it, 6-goal handicap. So he's quite advanced for a kid who's barely been playing, but he's just fearless. Again, he likes that speed, the adrenaline. He's just going for it. He's absolutely addicted. He can't stop playing it. The next one, yeah. The 32 Olympics come around, and remember, he's still a German citizen, actually, even though his mother's American. He was born in Germany, and later on he applies for citizenship, but he's German, so he's going to be the envoy for the German team when they come over here, et cetera, et cetera. And in polo, finally, at one point, he's playing a very aggressive game in Montecito, and he's racing along. And basically, it's the last chukker, actually, a very important polo match, going full speed ahead, goes over the top of the pony, lands on his head. Oops. No, fractures his skull. He's unconscious in the hospital for 3 weeks. Comes out and his wife is begging him, give up polo, for crying out loud. And finally he said, yeah, okay, I'll sell the ponies. He did. But then, because I told you he was very smart and very inventive, he goes and invents and has somebody develop it and put it together in Europe, and that is a helmet. So it's filled with rubber, and he goes right back to polo. Okay, next is we go to Alaska with his cousins, and they go on one of those engine cars. Anyhow, the car is speeding to get wherever they're going. They're going around a curve. It goes off on the highest, longest, scariest trestle at that time in Alaska. And they careen along, and they, anyway, careen goes off the track, careens around, stops, and it's a 200-foot drop. And instead, he gets out with his cousins and starts taking pictures. Another train comes along or something and rescues them, and then they're fine, etc. And they find a bush pilot to take them to Anchorage. And when the pilot drops them off, he picks up another group to leave Anchorage of a bunch of hunters, and the plane crashes into the mountains and everyone's killed. 3 times, okay, 4 times. Then let's see, another time, he's with his cousins in Palm Springs. They spend a lot of time there. And they plunged over the cliff at Whitewater Point in Palm Springs in their brand new, this will make the men cry, Cadillac V12 Sport Phaeton total wreck. And then let's see, another time he was trying to land to go visit the Hammonds at the Hammond Estate, you know, right next to, well, the Biltmore, that area. He was trying to land and something went wrong, and he ends up landing, crashing, destroying the plane, just destroying the rocks, just 75 feet, you know, down the coast from the Biltmore Hotel. And that was what was left of it. Yeah. In fact, when this one happened, he says he tried to pancake the landing, and the wing bent under his door where the thing landed. So then he couldn't get out of the airplane. So he pushed and pushed, everything starts going on fire. At the last minute, he's able to get out of the airplane and literally walks 10 feet away, and the whole thing explodes. Everybody's in a panic who's witnessing it. They're calling the ambulance and the doctors and everything else. He's completely unscathed, except that his hair was singed, and he joked and said, well, I was on my way to Los Angeles for a haircut anyway. I mean, only someone like this is going to go to LA for a haircut, but okay. So because of all these things, oh, we even have newspaper articles. Love trumps jinx card of death. Wealth, high adventure, and quarrels threaten the von Rombergs, but somehow Baron always saves his life and re-wins his wife. Because she starts having it with all this polo and all this dangerous stuff. She files for divorce in 1933. They're on their way to Reno to finish it, and they decide to make up and take a second honeymoon. And then another year later, the same thing happens. So they go through these almost divorces. Here we have a couple of notices. There you have it. And then we have they're all made up. The fact that it would be, that they're all happy would make a news article. I mean, it's one thing for People magazine, but to have it in the regular news, well, there you have it. All righty. So they decide that they just can't live together. So they separate, but they're still in touch the whole time. And she looks like she's just, you know, the innocent little thing here, the subdued Baroness. von Romberg makes her own daring fashion statements. So what he was doing with machines and cars and everything else, I guess she was doing the same thing with way that she would dress very fashionably and perhaps over the top. Let's see. Here's just one of the portraits of someone that had done it. So this is pretty chic, but there's many stories that came out. Probably not all of them are true, but they all have one thing in common, which was that she liked to be very daring and to shock people. So she came through the front doors of the Coral Casino wearing red shorts and a bandeau sweater, which was red on one side, yellow on the other. And to finish off that ensemble, she had high heels. One was red and one was yellow. So she walked through the doors. The elderly matrons looked askance, but there you have it. And her parties were legendary. Apparently, she had an opium pipe, word has it, with her name inscribed on it. They said that there was rumors of love affairs. I haven't found anything consistent. They were just people talking about people talking that she had an affair. And the most sensational one was Tarzan, Johnny Weissmuller. And don't know if this is true. And let's see, some of the other dramatic appearances she made was at a ball at the Coral Casino, and everybody was there. Everyone was there. And she came into the ballroom in a mink coat, very finely bejeweled and coiffed, into the middle of the room. And at the precise moment, just when everything's right there, she throws off her mink coat and there is nothing underneath. I don't know if that's true, but I like the idea of it. Just to have been there and to have told the story. And the other one was at the Beaux-Arts Ball in New York City. And of course, the Rockefellers are there, the Morgans are there, everybody of anything is there. And it's the diamond ball. So they're all wearing their diamonds. And she's wearing $500,000 worth of diamonds. She's got them in a tiara. She's got them on her wrist. She's got them as a bracelet. She's got them on her turban, on her fingers. And for more drama, she had 4 black orchids pinned on her halter top. So that would have been quite the show. But her insurance company said, we only insure you for California. Not so far, I don't know why, but at least that's the way the terms were. So she had 2 bodyguards and put them with her designer who made costumes for the 2 bodyguards so that then she would be protected throughout the evening. Alrighty, and she still got a little more spice with her. She's not taking any all of her husband's stuff lying down, or maybe she does in the sun. But again, you know, who takes pictures of people back then just suntanning? I got the right one? Yeah. She starts in 1935. She said to everybody, here's the deal. Some people just can't work together. They live together, but we're the opposite. We can't live together, but we can work together. So she lives at her mother's house, Glen Oaks. He's wherever they were living at that time. And she's going to start a magazine, and it's called Aperitif. And this is a saucy, nasty, not nasty, just saucy, naughty, little publication of society, gossip, the arts, the theater, and what have you. Smart chatter is how someone referred to it. Actually, I would love to do one of these myself, but okay. And it was published in Santa Barbara, edited in Carmel, and printed in Pacific Grove, as she said. One of her editors was actually Stanton Delaflame, who was the Pulitzer Prize editor of the San Francisco Chronicle back in what was 42, but he started off working for her at this point. And he bought 5 stories from a little unknown author at that time named William Saroyan. So this is where he got his start. Apparently, the editor said, well, he turned in 10 stories. I gave him $100 and I took 5 of them. But nonetheless, this was kind of his kick out there. And she was witty and sarcastic, but she was not above making fun of her own troubles. Here's some pictures of actually, this is a story about her doing her newspaper. I couldn't get a copy of the magazine. But you see, here's a close-up. So here is her giving Max the boot, and he's going off the polo pony. So but the big scandal for this one was, because we always have to have a little scandal in here, is she goes to, she gets some idea in her head, goes to the Santa Barbara Police Department, has her picture taken as a mugshot. You know, it's just pretty ugly. You stand up against the white wall, get your shot taken. And then she talked several of her friends to come in and do the same thing. Now, they don't know how she's going to use these photos, but they just know she's going to use those and put her in her publication. And they're kind of all a Twitter about the whole thing. And the big scandal is that when she does this, she puts in with their pictures of actual naughty criminals. And the point that she's trying to make is that maybe the difference between the bad guys and the good guys is just good lighting. Now, one of the ladies she puts up is the wife of Mr. Jay Gould, who is the huge moneyed finance. It's all money. And here's her before shot, and here's her mug shots. And as the caption here says, the joke that didn't come off so well, you probably can't read this here. It says, here are the profile and full face mug photos of the very social Mrs. Eleanor Gould Stevens with numbers faked in. It was published surrounded by photos of several criminals in Baroness von Romberg's piquant magazine Aperitif, and was Jay Gould's daughter Soar. So the daughter sends a telegram and says, will you please have the picture of me in Aperitif taken out some way? I confess the picture makes me look criminal, but I do object to being included with professional specimens. I love the wording on this. I hope it will not be necessary for me to take legal steps to have this done. So our dear Baroness is such a hoot. She goes, okay, fair enough, but she's already got it out on the stands. So she has a little stamp made, and she goes to all the stands. There she is, blocking out Mrs. Stevens' face. And I guess she had to go down to Los Angeles, and she had some up north as well. She must have sent someone up there and just said, go on the stands, block it all out. All righty. So because of all this, they decide to make up, and what they want to do is they're going to build a house together. Now they are going to put their lives together, and it's all going to work out somehow. And this is the house that there's secrets about. It's a swastika-shaped plan, and the decorations, an abundance of secret passages and concealed spaces. And there's some kind of radio transmitting tower up in the tower. And this gives a lot of speculation to the locals about that sort of Nazi theme. Now, Luda Marie Riggs, whom you should all know, one of our premier architects of Santa Barbara, was the designer for this. And what's a little bit, I don't know, deconcerting, it's more intriguing to me is when I read about this estate being built by, designed by Luda Marie Riggs in all the magazines and just kind of the popular things about town. They always talk about that she's the protege of George Washington Smith, who was the Spanish revival, and that this shows her skill in the Spanish and Italian and everything else. And I'm thinking, well, I'm not an architect, but I is a college graduate. And when I look at this, I'm hard pressed to find all this Italian, Spanish, anything. It sort of looks like Art Deco and Kem Weber and Barry Burkus all met up one day at the drafting table, and something close to that. But the idea is that they're reuniting in love. And at that time, a big movie that came out was, is that the right one? Romeo and Juliet with Leslie Howard and Norma Shearer. And this was the idea. It was going to be this Italianate kind of a thing, and, you know, showing their love. And it's, oh, just so romantic. And that's how it started out. And that's where Luda Marie Riggs started drafting on the house. But then along the way, let's see, it was in January of, I think, 37 or 36, that Emily is reading the December 14th, I'm sorry, just these things just stick in my head, December 14th issue of Life magazine. And they have a big, huge article about the Museum of Modern Art in New York and all the things that are happening with modern art. And she sees this little photograph of a little maquette, if you will, of Amelia Terry, his snail house, and she's absolutely transfixed by this. She's totally blown away from this, about this, and she goes back to Luda and says, let's change it. Let's change it up. And so with that, they go to new designs. Here's just some sketches. I don't know if, oh, you can't see that, but there is a swastika here. There is a thing that looks like a snail house, and that was sort of, looks like Ziegfeld's Follies, you know, when they have all the girls on a swirl. Anyway, it just shows that she was sort of drafting along with that. And here you can see some of the, how the kind of changes happen. Up at the top, it's a little more the romantic Italian, the Spanish. And as we're going to the next one down here, she's going to the modern look and changing things around. And at the end, you see how the house looks similar, or at least at that time, I don't know what the changes are thereafter. So you see the progression of these styles. Let's see. Oh, just here's some more modern pieces in some different angles. And there are some places where we'll see, oops, we're not there yet. Some of that Italian, some of that more Spanish revival and the arches and things. Here's a picture of Emily, and you just see it kind of looks very stark there. But then here it has that friendlier, warmer feeling. The house has their colors, remember, maroon and gray, or they might do it in different rooms with pink. And here we have Emily's room. The curtains are gray and white with, I think, the pink valance across the top. Her bed that looks so simple, it's in iron and gold metal. Anyway, it belonged to one of the generals of Napoleon. So that was a heck of a place to have your bed, but there you go. And I love this one, the bathroom. Is that just so Art Deco looking? It's just so charming. The only plaything that was really out of place in the entire house when they built it was the moose head. And this was probably that moose that we talked about earlier. The other thing was talking about the suspicions of the Nazi. Oh, do I have it here? And you can see that there's this sort of the iron cross that they have in different places in the house. There were peepholes in there. Here she is with her dog called Boulder. It's not a perfect name for the size of that dog. And what else? And this is another room. I just want to, it's too bad I don't have a great photograph of this. It's, this is the drawing room, and it's over the mantle is actually 12 pieces of mirror. And the man who painted that is very allegorical, and it's in colors of chartreuse and vermilion and gold and pink. And it was painted by Nikolai Remeshoff, who was the art director for the Chicago Opera. So I thought that was rather interesting if you're going to have painting and murals done in your house. Oh, so some of the other things on the house. There were a whole lot of, so there was this very loose swastika when she was doing it, just meaning that you do the cross and there's a lot of light. Remember that Luda Marie Riggs loved a house filled and filled with light. And then if you think of taking your cross and then sort of extending it, but when the house was built, it doesn't look like a swastika. You just see vaguely some little bits of it, but it's not a nice clean, you're flying over in your little Cessna and saying, oh, look, a swastika. You wouldn't recognize it from that. So just to put that part out there. The other thing, though, was the house was filled with all kinds of little secret rooms and secret passages. So the rumors were, was this something to do with the Nazis? On the other hand, this couple was so young and they were sort of into all, crazy things. You could see where they just loved the idea of like old castles having secret passages. So they had an iron cross peephole, another one in a ceiling so that you could look down on different people. There was a trap door in a closet off the front hall. There were 5 exits, some of them secret, coming out from the wine cellar. There was a very sophisticated teletalk system that was put in the house. And again, people say, was this because they were entertaining Nazis, or was this just because that's what they were into? And there was a rumor that they were only having German firms build the house. And to somewhat, that was probably true, because when you look at the list, there was a lot of German names, so who knows? And let's see, there was also 3 rooms that went behind the master bedroom, and a hidden circular staircase that went from the basement all the way up to right under the roof line. So, all this is pretty good. They're wrapping up the house. It's now 1938. He's still playing polo. He goes back east, flies back east to go to a wedding. He's on his way to a polo game. And then we meet the final crash. Do we? Nope, not yet. Just some more pictures. So that one looks very pretty and looks very Italian, Spanish. Now this takes us to the final crash. He's flying a 10,000, again, another new plane, $10,000 Beechcraft Stagger Wing, which would be worth about $200,000 today. And this is his 4th, 5th plane, something like that, that I know of. And he's trying to fly, he makes headline news all over the country. Every paper has this about this guy who's not known for anything other than just having money and being young and playing polo. He was trying to land in New Jersey, and he actually, there was a lot of fog. The ceiling was about 400 feet. He couldn't find the landing field. And people said they could hear the plane circling and circling. And anyway, he ends up going into the river. He was not, they did not have a gyro compass on the plane, and he was not instrument rated. Although at one point he had over 2,000 hours. I don't know if that was at his death or if that was the previous time. So, you know, he was skilled enough at it, but nonetheless, he ends up in the river. There's a sample of what the plane looked like. And there's the wreckage of the plane. So just like when you crash in those days, that's the end of the plane. Wow. So that was the end of Max. And after all this, he's only 27 years old. That's how much life they've been living in that time. But nonetheless, where are those Nazis? So we come to the next part, which is the grieving widow recovers. And, you know, it was quite the love story. I forgot, oops, they're not, sorry, I'm not coordinated here. Yeah, so they're actually bringing, you can actually see the body, which is kind of weird, but it was about 10 feet of water that he was in the river when they pulled him out. Now, the grieving widow recovers. She goes back to Montecito. She does host a whole lot of parties. I don't know if they were gigantic, but certainly a whole lot of dinner parties, a whole lot of things that make the news. That's why we know how she's recovering, although they were very much in love. But nonetheless, she calls her, let me see. Sorry, but this is a little bit morbid. This is how the newspapers are. In the sun once more. In seclusion since the death of her husband, Emily Baroness von Romberg, et cetera, how she's in her elaborate Montecito home recovering. Just that's how things go. Alrighty, so she goes to the following August. It's about a year after her father's husband's death. She goes to a fiesta party. It's at Dwight Ludington, so Val Verde in Montecito, and all kinds of movie stars, et cetera, are there. Walter Pidgeon, Vincent Bryce. There's a reporter who said, I put the quote down, when Santa Barbara's creme de la creme filed past the Roman statues, they were so elaborate, the Santa Barbara people, et cetera, that they made even the marble figurines blink their eyes for a second look. So everybody's in the nines, and especially back then, you dressed for fiesta. I mean, you dressed to the nines. So Emily has some wild red ruffled dress that was written up in one of the papers. And she's so glamorous that she meets up with someone and they elope to Las Vegas 4 days later. She calls her mother and says, Mom, just want to let you know I remarried. And the mother said, well, whatever, I just hope the one you don't marry that should never get around with is Adolf Spreckles, as in Spreckles Sugar. In fact, she married Adolf Spreckles. Now, I just have to comment. Here they are. She is now an old lady at 31. He's 27. He's even younger because it's a year later. He looks ancient here. She looks like the demure little Fraulein in her little alpine dress. You know? But at any rate, she elopes with him, and well, they first. Yeah, she goes to when they run off. There was one thing that I noticed, I should have pointed out earlier, is every time you see her, she always has leopard print, leopard scarf, leopard jacket, leopard. And once again, here she is with her hat, and the pin on her hat is all diamond from Cartier, and her husband, the first one, Max, brought it to her, and it's of a polo player. You probably can't make it out too well here, but it's a polo player. Alrighty. She didn't even bother getting a bridal dress, just boom, off they go, and she's happy. So let's talk about him. So this is his, right now when you look at this, he either looks like a mass murderer who would have a 3-part name, right? Or a wife beater. And in fact, sadly, he's a wife beater. This is his 4th wife in 7 years. The first one he had some children by, and he was married just for 3 years. The second one divorced him within 3 months. The last, third one before this was actually his second cousin. They were married in July, and by the next, before 1 year was up, they were already separated. So he is also a very daredevil like Max, but he's much more violent about everything. He is a drinker. He's an alcoholic. He also uses drugs. He's a drug abuser. And even just within the first couple of months, they're at a hotel and he starts to drink. And when she tried to get him to stop, he attacked her. He blackened both her eyes, wrenched her arm, injured her wrist, broke her nose, lacerated her tongue and her mouth. And it was extensive enough that she needed to go to medical care. They also had for the next several years an on again, off again relationship, just on, off, couldn't stay away. You just think that's not true love like Max. This is just something else weird to me, what was going on. And they had their first anniversary and it was written up in the papers, and then he beat her up that night. And she was actually terrified of him, and says one place that she was hiding in the house in one of the secret chambers, and then she was scared all night that she wouldn't be able to get out, like maybe the door would permanently lock and then she wouldn't be able to get out. However, she also hired a keeper for Adolf that was on the property, and that when Adolf was off too much, he was probably just really drunk or really out with drugs, the other guy would come over, the keeper, and give Adolf, here's a problem, you got the name Adolf, right, with the Nazi thing, and give him a hypodermic just to get him out. Let's see, and so finally they do file for divorce. And when they start accusing everybody of what's wrong with the other person, that's when all the Nazis showed up. So they each accuse each other of being a big Nazi lover, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's accusations and cross accusations. One that she said on him was when they were in, what's the name of the restaurant? Luchau's, something like that, in New York, which was a big German restaurant. And he takes out a Nazi flag and sticks it on the table. And she was so embarrassed because, of course, that would not have been popular. His story was, no, I just did that for a joke. No, but the people who were there at the time said it was not a joke. Somebody came by and said, Hitler is a heel Hitler. And then this guy, Adolf, makes a bigger to-do about his flag, and that the restaurant owner came over and said, would you please take that flag down? And they didn't. So then he asked them to leave the restaurant. So Emily was absolutely horrified and embarrassed about the whole thing. And obviously he had a thing for his little Nazi stuff. And some of the other stuff they had. Meantime, he accuses her and says, well, look at you have entertained all these Nazis in the house. And she said, no, those are all your Nazi friends. And he said, no, those were yours. And he's actually names off different German people. The Duke of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, I probably didn't pronounce that right, who was on a mission, he said, for Hitler, Prince Louis Ferdinand, the grandson of the former Kaiser, and others from the German consulates and embassies. And as she explained, no, they did come to the house, but they weren't in the Nazi thing. They were, part of the old guard. And of course, her husband would like to keep connections with that. Maybe there'd be a place for him in Germany, something along those lines. And he accuses her more and says, the house was in a swastika. There was swastikas all over the house. She said there were these adornments. And then she said, yes, there were some, but they were, and even Luda says that it wasn't a swastika, wasn't just for the Nazis, it was an Indian symbol that was popular, and said, but she took them down because Adolf was so Nazi that she took these Nazi shaped ornaments down so that people wouldn't think that they were being the Nazi thing. He also accused her of there's two other things I'll think of in a second. That the house was in the swastika, that she brought that there, that she gave him a swastika bracelet when they got married. Didn't hear anything on that, or yes or no. And that her dog, the dachshund, was named Swastika. So, at any rate, they do finally get married, get divorced, which was probably a good idea. Now, that should sum up everything, except what happens happily ever after? Is there a happy ending? Yes, this is a whole nother slideshow for somebody else to do. She marries a third time, and the man that she marries Emily Hall Tremaine, and she gets rid of her other names right away and goes back to her maiden name. She marries Burton Tremaine Sr. Anybody recognize that name? He's the brother of Warren Tremaine. That might be a little more familiar. Warren's wife's name was Catherine Kit Tremaine. So you just see in Santa Barbara, you think there's everything separate, and you start to see all these combinations of people going in and out. He was also into piloting and fast stuff, etc., but he was a very loving man. They were married for 43 years. And remember, I talked about in her upbringing in Europe and going to the great museums and having these tutors that would take her through and train her about this. She becomes, even early on, collecting art. So when she teams up with Tremaine, they go really hog wild into collecting art, and they especially loved discovering unknown new artists in the contemporary and modern field. And when they both died, they had one of the largest, most impressive collections of this art known in the United States. Very, very influential. Oh, wait. Here's just a happy, loving couple. None of that drama going on. And here are some of the arts that they had. They included Andy Warhol and Piet, yes, thank you, among their deals. Well, I think basically that's kind of sums up that each house here has a story. And it's not just a simple thing, that the people here are so fascinating and have such rich lives. And here was such a young couple. You realize when their relationship ended, they were just barely 30. And what a full life of everything that they put in, and how this has been an influence, that the house is still there. If I understand correctly, the people who have it now are trying to restore it back, to take all the extra things that have happened on over the years and take it back to its original status. If anybody knows something different. Oh, I forgot to put the map in. It's on Hot Springs. You're going up towards the mountains. You've just passed Schoolhouse. And before you get to Pepper Lane on the left, is that a pretty good description? So you've got Hot Springs, Pepper Lane. If Schoolhouse ran through it, it would have run through there, and there's a creek on the other side of the house. And so you can't see it too much from the road. Unless you're standing on top of a semi and can see over the edge or something. Sorry? No, it's on Hot Springs. It's on Hot Springs, but before you get to. No, on Hot Springs, on Hot Springs. Okay, if you're going towards the ocean and you're heading down Hot Springs, the expert here said you can see it real clearly through the gates on Hot Springs. So you're on Hot Springs, you're heading to East Valley, you haven't gotten there yet. Schoolhouse is on the right. Did I say it backwards? Okay. Going towards the beach, and it's on your right. Yeah, okay, I was still going, thinking north, okay, yeah. And so that is the first of our mansions today, and I thank you for your time. Unless there's any questions. Question. So they did not have any children. She never did. I believe Tremaine had children from a previous marriage. I think he had at least one daughter, maybe two daughters. Yes. No, I don't think so. There was a big story in Vanity Fair, I think it was, or Variety, that talked about, Jim, who was the one I told you? Barrymore, that Barrymore, what's her face, Drew bought it, and they did a whole story on it. And then afterwards they came back and said, or at least online, whoops, this is the house. Everything we told you was true, but she didn't buy this house. She bought something else, which is kind of a weird retraction. Oh, okay, good news. Okay, scoop. She bought the house across the street. That's why they were confused. Okay. Any other, or if you have a comment, something you know that you want to add. Yes. Yes. So at the Wadsworth Athenaeum in Hartford. Hartford? Connecticut, thank you, is where there is that collection, because his business was with the Miller Company. And she's saying that's where there's a huge, and you can look it up online, but humongous collection, humongous collection. I remember reading something that said some of their artwork sold so much that they were sort of distressed because they weren't buying some of those pieces to make money, which, you know, you buy either you love it, you want to do it for, you know, collection or to impress, and that they just really want to get these people off the ground. But at the same time, with the money that they earn, they could, you know, do other good things for it in the community, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, I thank you for your time.